Hello everyone, welcome to week 6 of the DDI webinar series. Once again, we're going to have Elizabeth Jenks doing a presentation today. Thank you to everyone who's been turning in the materials for the previous webinars. I hope we were able to answer everyone's questions as we've gone along here, and as always, if you have questions today, feel free to type them in the chat box to the right on the toolbar, and we will address them throughout the webinar today. Any other questions after the webinar today, please feel free to email ddi@wayne.edu. And as always, today's webinar will be archived, the video portion of it, and will be posted no later than noon tomorrow. Most of the time I've been able to get them up later on Thursday. So all the materials will also be linked to the webinar archives page as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth here, and I'll let her get started.
Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day out there. We made it through this winter. Wasn't it great? Appropriately enough, today the topic is family support, and I have family supporting me here as well today. I have my son, Robert, supporting me as I do the webinar. So I think that's only appropriate. Before we get started, I'd like to talk about last week's homework for a minute and just kind of do some review. There was a little bit of confusion, and maybe between the two definitions of inclusion and mainstreaming. A few people, I know we kind of rushed it in on the end of Jennifer's week, Jennifer Greening's week, and that was 2 weeks ago. So I'm referring to week 4's homework. Inclusion, everyone pretty much got. You know, when children with disabilities are fully included in their school and in their classroom, okay? They get supports to participate in a regular education classroom. Mainstreaming is a little different, okay? Actually, mainstreaming is a lot different. Mainstreaming is when students are in only a few classes with regular education students, okay? Some of you did say the word guests, and I think that Jennifer used the word guests in other classes, and so that was appropriate, and I accepted it, but just for the clarification, because it's a pretty big difference, I thought we'd review it this morning. And I want to thank everybody for participating, getting their work in on time. I'm hoping that that continues, and here we are. We're already at week 6. We've got just a couple more weeks left, and I believe Angela Martin is presenting next week, and her topic is going to be policy and legislation and current events. Then Michael Bray will be presenting on post-secondary education experiences for students with disabilities. And lastly, but not least, we're going to have Mr. Andre Robinson, and he's going to talk about advocacy and how to be a self-advocate, an effective self-advocate. So we're wrapping up, and I just wanted to say too, so many of you have stuck with us. There's like a group of 40 social workers that have been with us now through week 6. And gosh, you're so close to finishing now. Please just get the assignments in on time, and I want y'all to get the CEs, all right? And it's 13.5 continuing education credits, okay? So with that being said, let's get started. I don't have any clips today, so we're just going to kind of proceed through the presentation. Our learner objectives: identify the benefits of evidence-based family support models, define the role of a peer mentor, identify an effective method of teaching new skills, identify differences between case management and peer mentor models and supporting families. And I didn't make this a learner objective, but we're going to talk about behavioral health interventions for people with disabilities and their caregivers. All right, let's go way back to the 1950s. And that's when the terminology family center began to emerge. Ironically enough, it does not mean anything, it doesn't mean the same thing as it does today. Actually, it came out of the child welfare system, social services, and it started in California with a social service program for multi-problemed families, okay? But there became this evolution over the next 50, 60 years to bring it to where it is today. There was, of course, some legislation that influenced the model. One of the most important being IDEA, Individuals with Education Handicapped Children's Act in 1975, which legislated special education for children with developmental disabilities. That had something called the IEP as part of its function, the Individual Education Plan, which was the goals for the child, the educational goals, and this mandated parental participation. So little by little, the family-centered philosophy began to infiltrate through schools, through programs, through agencies, and there became a recognition that we needed to do more training around family-centered practice for social workers, educators, OTs, PTs, therapy programs, and alike. Also, at about this same time, in 1960, the President Kennedy's panel on mental retardation included parents as well as researchers on this panel that he mandated to find out, what do families need? What do people with disabilities need to have a quality of life? Some of you may recall that President Kennedy had a sister who had a mental health disability, and I think some cognitive disabilities as well. So he was very interested in finding out, from scholars, what do families need? What do people need? So all of this, as usual, when any kind of change comes in the field, there's multiple things occurring at the same time that create synergy. These are some exemplary programs. Some of them are still in existence. Parent to Parent started in 1975, which is an international organization now. They have a wonderful way of linking parents to other parents to support them on their journey. There's parent training and information centers. We have one in our state. It's through the ARC of Michigan, Michigan Alliance for Families, and if you want to go on their website, they have wonderful training available to parents. There's Parents Helping Parents, which started back in 1976. There's the Mentor Visiting Program, MVP, which is in some states. So, there's been this movement of various projects that have now been evaluated for a number of years and found to be very successful in supporting families. What makes a good project? What makes a good peer mentorship family support project? Well, let's talk about good parent-to-parent and family support projects should have a component of peer mentors. And these are other parents who support the parent with special needs. Why that's jumping up there, sorry. There's some key characteristics in good parent-peer programs, and here they are. The parents who are going to be the mentors or the caregivers, and these can be grandparents as well, or siblings. So we should pre-screen these individuals, just like you would if they were applying for any other job. You want to ask them what kind of time they can give to the project, what areas of interest they have. You should have an informational meeting with your parents or your caregivers that are going to be peer. There should be clear and concise written materials on the role that they're going to be playing with other parents. You should delineate time commitments and compensation, because parents are just like professionals. They need to be compensated for their time. There should be competency-based training for peer mentors before they start working with other families. At DDI, we did something called the Community Liaison Training. We also did family navigation training, and this was our training project to train parents in how to be good peer mentors. It had a case component to this, just like your training that you're doing with the webinar series. The homework is what we call a competency-based assignment. When we ask you to do the assignment to see what you learned as we trained. And so we wanted to do that with good parent mentorship programs as well. We want to make sure that parents, but we want to know that they can actually demonstrate the skill set when they leave our training. And the parent mentor should have ongoing support. all right, a way to vent and talk about situations they've come across, much like you social workers, right, have supervision, and you get to talk about sometimes, things that have happened, or when you're burning out, or if you have questions, you have a peer you can go to. Well, good peer mentorship models for parents who have kids with special needs have the same key characteristics. This we found to be very important. Making the best match between the family that's going to get served and the mentor that's going to serve them. You might be looking for family characteristics that they share together, maybe personality characteristics. A disability match might be important, especially for parents that, have a child that they feel like they're really, like nobody understands them, that because their child has this disability, and sometimes it's very helpful to assign them a peer mentor as a child with a similar disability. Culture can be very important on a match, and we want to make sure that our peer mentors, have some similar values, and can match this with other parents. We want strengths, positive outcomes, and self-determination. Oh, we're having a little technical difficulty, but Mike's going to help me out when it happens the next time. So if I go on pause for a few seconds, that's what's going on. Effective community liaison practice. Community liaison is another word we use for peer mentor, and the reason why that's on that slide is because at DDI we ran family support projects for about 7 years here. Actually, it was 8 years. Our first project was the Detroit Family Support Project, where we supported families using a peer mentorship model. And in that project, we called our peer mentors navigators. When we had the Michigan Family Support Initiative, we called our peer mentors community liaisons. So that's the terminology we've used here instead of peer mentor, and that's why you've got it on the slide there, but it means the same thing. So here are some other keys to effective practice when you're using a peer mentor. You have to have trust, okay? People, that this is right, the basis of friendships and other relationships, so you have to have trust. You have to view the parents of these children with special needs as the experts. They're with their child most of the time. They are the experts over their family and their children, and that has to be respected. The individual drives their family plan, okay? Because the peer mentor works on goals with the family as well. So it's the family that identifies those goals. And there has to be a reciprocal relationship between the peer mentor and the parent, right? We don't want one to feel like the other has authority over. It doesn't really work that way. You want to have reciprocal relationships. So here in review, family facilitates the program. The family identifies what they want. Families all have strengths. And sometimes I know we get caught up with this. We'll just look at a family and we'll be like thinking, right, as social workers, as advocates, my gosh, this family has so much going on. They have this child who's very ill. They don't have a lot of support. They've got so many appointments. They may not have enough money to sometimes get food on the table. They might not have transportation. And we're just looking at this and we're writing all these things or assessing these things. And it's sometimes difficult to find strengths. But what I've always done with this is when my peer mentors have come to me and said, it was just really hard to identify strengths, I say, you know what? A strength is that they came to us for support. That's a strength. They're looking for support. They want to learn. They want to move forward. So I use that on my individual family plan, is that the family is interested in, getting on with life and moving forward. An interdisciplinary team works best with a peer mentor, and that can be other people from other agencies. It can be people who work at the child's school. It can be neighbors, okay? So it takes a team. The old saying, right? It takes a village to raise a child. Well, it's especially true of a child with special needs. So let's think about the family as a system, as peer mentors would. The family unit is composed of each unique family, of each unique individual member. You know, we're a unit. A family is a system within multiple systems. We don't family in traditional ways as being mother, father, children. It can be grandparents parenting. It can be partners parenting. Peer mentors have to keep in mind that identifies the goals, okay? And that each family is unique. They each have their own personal identities that need to be respected. The peer mentors the family in identifying and prioritizing family goals they can work on. The peer mentor is, I think this is very, very important, the community, the liaison, if you will, for the family and the surrounding community. All right, the goal is to get the family integrated in the community. Remember what Jennifer said? That it was so important, right? That her family be engaged in outside activities like skiing and, you know, going to sporting events. That's the role of a peer mentor, is to get the family out and get them involved and integrated. What I like about peer mentor is that peer mentor lives in the family's community, oftentimes, most times, and they know what's out there. They use the system themselves. They've used paid and unpaid, right? They go to the library. They go to parks and recreation activities, so they can share that. And I put this in here, and mostly I put this in here because I just wanted to say that, you know, we want to refer back to the first week when we talked about perspective. So it's very important as we think about families and family support to think about them as a system within systems, right? They're a system interacting with each other, grandparent, caregiver, children, siblings, aunts, uncles, interacting within a larger system, education system, social services agencies, you know, federal programs like Social Security, child care. You know, think about some of the other systems as we go through this. So it gets very complex. Sometimes I find it useful as a peer mentor, or even in my own life I do this sometimes. I actually use the circle system to identify and problem solve. You know, who's out there that can help me get through this problem, either with my own family or other, you know, families. And I just want to say, none of us could be where we're at today, sitting here listening to the webinar, without some type of support, right? Most of us got here because, you know, we had support in some way. Many people have kids home today because it's a holiday week in Michigan. So some of you are relying on child care. Some of you might be relying on neighbors in your community, or television even might be on in the background to entertain your children while you do this. So we all need support. I think this is another key characteristic on this slide about, you know, what's so special about the peer mentorship model for family support. It's really about empowerment, okay, versus this feeling that sometimes parents get in caregivers of hopelessness, frustration, and apathy. When parents have a child with developmental disabilities or a child who's very ill, oftentimes you get so caught up in the day-to-day survival mode of life that you can't really harness the ability to think about dreams for your child, for your family, and how you're going to access the resources to get to your dreams and your goals. You know, and you need some guidance and help people, you know, someone to help you, like a peer mentor, to help you make some decisions and help you do some problem solving. And sometimes we have to teach behaviors to help parents get what they need and want. And we teach assertiveness skills and to help parents acquire what they need once they're able to do that. The peer mentor practice is typically an individual who is personally impacted by a disability. They've walked the walk, okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. But it could be a sibling or it could be a grandparent that's a peer mentor, but somehow their life has been touched by disability. I think that's what makes the model work. All right, and I think that the literature also cites that peer mentors should speak the language of the family, okay, when possible. So in summary of the peer mentorship model, these are kind of some of the points we just touched on. Remember, the family is a system engaged in its community. Remember what we said way back on week 1. The higher the quality of life, the more places involved. All right? So a quality of life means a lot of engagement in a lot of different types of activities. Parents and families experience isolation. Talked about this a few moments ago. The community is the key. A peer mentor can engage the family in that process. They're the community connector, the person that, support the family in getting out there and getting engaged in community. So they're really a collaborator between the community. And that relationship, that collaborative relationship, is key in its success. Here are some other evidence-based practices around peer mentorship models and family support. Remember, the family identifies their needs. The peer mentor may ask questions. Sometimes the peer mentor, maybe it doesn't think that the goal that the family is working on maybe should be the very first goal. But we have to respect that it's the family that's guiding the process, right? So we don't want to pass judgment on things. For instance, sometimes a family might choose that the first thing that they want to work on is, getting a car, all right? But we might think that, well, I think maybe the first thing we need to do is, get the child into a Head Start program, all right? Well, we can include the Head Start goal, but we have to also remember the car is integral to getting people to and from places. We do live in the Motor City, but ironically enough, we have terrible mass transit, as many of you know. So we have to respect the decisions that families make. We also have to encourage, obviously educational goals for the children. The peer mentor needs to talk to the families about paid and unpaid supports, all right? Because what happens to paid support is we're seeing this as budget constraints occur statewide, right? A lot of formal supports are going away. A good example of this is, it used to be several years back when we had parents who had disabilities, and we're only going to touch on that briefly today, but we had parents with disabilities. There were a lot of really good wraparound projects in Detroit that I could refer families to that would actually, help them with their very specific needs because the parents had disabilities, whether it be a mental health, physical, or developmental challenge. Today, there are very few. I believe the Guidance Center downriver has one of the only programs. It's a parent-to-parent program that will work with parents who have disabilities, all right? So there's a case example how funding has, decreased and taken away supports that were there. So as a peer mentor, we need to work with families in getting into some unpaid supports. And a way I would resolve that problem today is getting other family supports programs that are in existence out there to incorporate the parent with a disability. And many of them are willing to do that, but you have to work with that process. It doesn't just happen. So it's a challenge. Another way of identifying unpaid supports are using what's out in the community, like parks and recreation programs, YMCA programs. Those have been around for a very long time and will probably be there for a very long time. They're not as dependent on government funding. So there are also, you might say, well, families might not have money to participate in some of those projects. Well, you should know that scholarships are sometimes available at Parks and Rec departments. and other organizations like YMCA. So it doesn't hurt to ask if they have stipends to support families who don't have money to do some of those activities. I think these last two are really important. Um, the peer mentor has to be culturally competent and sensitive. And we talked a lot about those characteristics last week. We don't need to go back through them this week, right? And that we teach empowerment. Parent mentors teach empowerment. And that's learned through engagement with the family and through teaching. So in review, some of the characteristics of a peer mentor are they are a parent or a sibling, they've experienced disability personally, they have extensive knowledge of available service, they've been through training, they live in their community, and they don't offer a set list of eligible services, okay? They're very flexible. And this leads us to examining the difference between peer mentorship models and case management models. Okay, both case managers or supports coordinators and peer mentors are trained, right? But one of the fundamental differences are that case managers have some limitations by what their actual agency that employs them, what they can offer families. Case managers and supports coordinators don't always live in the same community with the families they support. So while they're very knowledgeable about what their agency offers, they may be limited with knowledge about other community services where the family lives. Peer mentors teach the families how to navigate the community informal supports, including schools. Case managers are not obligated to teach those skills and to promote advocacy skills, but I do want to say this, Department of Community Health has in the last couple of years put into their job descriptions for case managers and supports coordinators that they are supposed to do advocacy promotion and teaching community-based skills. So I don't want to leave people with the impression that they're not doing that, because that is a part of their role. However, you have to realize supports coordinators, and some of you do work in these situations, you have very big caseloads, right? And oftentimes, even when you're working with families to do the person-centered planning process, you might only see that family 1 or 2 times a year. So it's a very difficult role because of time constraints for case managers and supports coordinators to do this mentorship piece, right? To walk the walk with the family, to be on call with the family. So there's some limitations, not because case managers don't want to do this, but they have limited time, they have limited resources. And I'm not saying that the peer mentors don't either, but there's a little more flexibility there, okay? If they don't have, we don't call caseloads, we have families we work with, and there's less families per peer mentor than case managers have clients on their caseloads. All right, so there's some qualitative studies out there. Now, you know I work at a university, so you couldn't get through this presentation without, we're going to always talk about literature. We're always going to talk about qualitative and quantitative research because DDI is located at Wayne State University, and we, we fully believe in this, that lead us to evidence. This is how we get to evidence-based practices, right? Is through research. So here's some results of qualitative research with families that ask them, what do you want? What do you want from professionals? What do you want from agencies? And these are some of the key things that they said. We want professionals to provide emotional support and friendship. We want to be linked to other parents who have children with disabilities. And we want culturally competent service provision. Now, we just talked about how time constraints and financial limits don't allow case managers and supports coordinators to be friends, and I'm not sure that that's an appropriate role, but they don't have the time to give that emotional support, outside the limited meetings that they have with families and individuals who have disabilities. They're not able to link parents because of confidentiality agreements, right? You can't divulge names. And I know that this is something we share in common, that parents requested is cultural competence piece. But how do we get to these other two components that parents want? This emotional support, friendship, and this linkage to other parents. Well, that's the peer mentor model. All right, they're not just another friendly face. Remember, just another parent you meet. They're trained specifically in how to do this role effectively. They know how to engage the parents. They've walked the walk. They work in partnership with the individual and the family. These unique perspectives, okay, make the peer mentor a creative, effective teacher who empowers his or her peers. And I just want to say in my own life, I learn more from, and I'm a social worker, and so my son, is involved with a lot of agencies and other organizations. But I have to say, as a parent, I learned the most from other parents. There was a little parent support group at my son's school, and I learned about a dentist that we still go to 20 years later that is stress-free for Robbie and I. We walk in there, they know what to do, they put his sunglasses on, they turn on the music. We get through our dental visits, which, as some of you know, who have parents who experience disability, can be a very stressful thing because children don't always understand open mouth, or the dentist's office can be scary. This became an easy thing for us to do. Robbie feels good about it, and I learned about this dentist through another parent. And interestingly enough, I digress for a moment. I saw this parent on Sunday. We hadn't seen each other for 10 years, and it was just like seeing your sister. So that bond that I'm telling you about, the peer mentors have, I've experienced it firsthand. It's a wonderful thing.
This was apologize. Now, as wonderful as this role is, peer mentors are meant to fade, okay? We don't stay a constant in a family's life. Some families are going to become peer mentors themselves. They're going to love this so much. They're going to be like, I want to give back now. I've gone through all this. I've got all this experience. In fact, that's how we find new peer mentors, is through people that go through the process. Other families, you're going to be engaged in their life as a peer mentor, and they're going to learn from you, and they're going to move on, and they won't become peer mentors, but they're going to move on with their life with confidence and the knowledge that you've shared with them. And how do you share that knowledge? Well, these are just some of the ways a peer mentor shares their knowledge. Through role play, all right? Through shadowing techniques and through stories. And let me just spend a minute talking about these. What we've done here at DDI with our peer mentors is we help the peer mentors engage the family in learning new skills with role playing. So sometimes parents aren't comfortable making a phone call on their own or going to an IEP meeting that maybe hasn't been such a pleasant thing for them in the past. And the peer mentors, or the navigators as we call them, would actually role play it. I'm the teacher. Okay, what do you think the teacher might say? And then you're the parent. Practice your assertiveness skills. How can you ask for this so the teacher will be really willing to help you through this and get what you need for your child? So role play is very effective, and we use it in all our training as well. And if you're a social worker, right, you did it all through grad school, and it's a really good teaching tool because it works. Shadowing is a little bit different, okay? This is for families who are ready to maybe practice a skill and just want a cheerleader by them while they do it. So now they might say, I just would like you to maybe listen to me while I make this phone call to Macomb Oakland Regional Center and ask for my respite services, or, I just want you to listen to me call Common Ground and make sure I'm using the right terminology, because I called before and I said child care, and they said, we don't offer child care for children who have developmental disabilities. Well, now I know I'm supposed to use the word respite. So can you just listen to me? And the peer mentor sits there quietly and coaches them along, and that's shadowing. And usually that's right before a parent is ready to kind of do things completely on their own.
Okay, so you start with like role play, you go to shadowing, and you begin fading out. Stories are very key in teaching families. Now, you'll know as a peer mentor kind of how much you want to share, all right? Sometimes as a parent of a child with disabilities, I, want to tell stories that I feel comfortable sharing. And I tell peer mentors, don't reveal things that are personal to you if you don't feel comfortable about it. And sometimes my other children, I think the story is a great story, but they don't feel comfortable with me sharing that and getting that out there, then I have to be respectful of that. And I'm respectful of peer mentors who don't want to share their personal stories all the time with other parents because that's their journey, and we have to respect that. Another way peer mentors teach competency is by identifying resources, and there's so many resources out there, right, on the internet. There are books, there are webinars, there's YouTube. There's so many resources. Sharing resources is really important with families, and they're free. Resources are the best. And the internet and Facebook are wonderful because you can do them at 3 a.m. in the morning, or you can do it the day your child's sick. You don't have to go out of your house. Teaching with multiple modalities, that means like training. There's a lot of great free training out there. Michigan Alliance for Family, if you go on their website, there's a ton of training. DDI does training. Visit our website. Webinars, there's a lot of webinars out there, and if you visit some of these websites, they'll advertise the webinars for families. Webinars are great, and it's multiple modality because they're free a lot of times, and you can listen in your pajamas, right? I don't know what people are out there wearing today, and I don't care, but that's what makes it nice. If you want your bunny slippers on, you can have your bunny slippers on, right? So training with multimodalities, that keeps it interesting. The other thing about that is that adult learners learn differently than children do. And so you want to engage your parents. If you're a peer mentor, you want to engage your parents with different ways of learning, universal learning techniques, all right? Because there's a greater likelihood they're going to learn that way. Conferences are also great. We talked about training websites, so I'm not going to belabor that. This is a component of this training that we're doing this morning on family support that's not on your learner objectives, but I really do think it's important to discuss because if you work with families who have children with special needs, you know that there's literature out there that talks about behavioral health services and how they can improve the quality of life, okay? So we have to be careful though, if we're in, if we're doing therapy or recommending therapy to families, what kind of therapy works best with children who have developmental disabilities? Well, I did some research on this, and there's a lot of evidence-based literature out there that cites play therapy as being a very effective type of therapy to work with young children who have intellectual disabilities. Now, traditionally, play therapy is done with kids between age 3 and 11. Now, I'm going to suggest that if you have, say, younger adolescents that you're suggesting this for who have intellectual disabilities, that might be okay, but proceed cautiously. We don't want adults doing play therapy, okay? We have to do age-appropriate techniques with people. So it would not be an effective or an appropriate technique with adults. Play therapy is, just what it implies. There are toys, there are things that the child picks up. Therapist kind of doesn't guide the play, just lets the child play, but gets down on the ground with the child, observes, might ask some questions to get at some of the feelings the child is having, and the child kind of they guide this process, all right? So you can see where it's not an appropriate technique with teens, older teens, or adults. Parent education classes are another really good way for parents to attain skills to make them feel more confident. And there are a lot of places you can go for parent education classes. You can just, parents as teachers is one place you can go. If you Google it, or a lot of agencies in Macomb, Oakland, well, statewide, community mental health agencies can identify parent training education programs that you might be able to attend in the community. We at DDI offer them occasionally. So that's just a word about that, but I'd like to revisit therapeutic interventions, okay? CBT works for people who have like Asperger's syndrome, and, you know, I guess I'd like to say, you know, people with disabilities have the same kind of issues that people who don't have disabilities. They might have fears of things, there may be abuse issues, they may need to reframe their thoughts in order to achieve new goals, okay? So we all have these commonalities. So just as an individual without a disability would seek therapeutic services to resolve these issues, so would an individual with a disability. And CBT is really effective for people with Asperger's. The literature did show that. And it's very effective for people with a mild range of intellectual disabilities. It can reduce stress and anxiety in parents as well who go through CBT. And CBT goes way back. It's still taught extensively in graduate schools. It's a reframing of the thought processes, right? And I could do probably 2 presentations on CBT, but if I had to sum it up very quickly, which I do have to, it's a reframing of thought processes, a rethinking of things, so that you reduce anxiety and reduce worry in your life, okay? So you're able to move forward. And I know that's oversimplifying it, but this is, you all probably have more knowledge than I do about CBT. So I'm just wanting to mention it today because it is an effective intervention for people who have disability. All right, let's move
to parents and care, because being a parent or caregiver can be very stressful, whether your child has a disability or not. But
oftentimes health concerns, and over a prolonged period of time, burnout occurs, and sometimes parents are depressed or caregivers get depressed. And what the literature cited was that a variety of interventions can help caregivers. Sometimes psychotropic medication for parents who have mental illness, advice, right? Just therapy or talking, respite care, you know, is very helpful in reducing depression and stress in caregivers. And this particular meta-study was by Hastings and Beck, 2004. Meta-study meaning it was a review of several types of different modalities, parents who have children with challenging behaviors and developmental and intellectual disabilities. So what this meta-study cited in its summation section was that 53% of the participants benefited from at least one of the multiple interventions I just mentioned, you know, either behavioral health services, improved their family outcome. It improved their family and how they felt about their family. Here's a little bit more about therapeutic interventions for caregivers at reducing stress and self-blame and guilt. This meta-study by Hastings and Beck, they found that group therapy is very effective at reducing parents' stress. Would go into that category. Cognitive behavioral therapy is effective for reducing parental self-blame and guilt. Children who have severe, this study included primarily parents who had children with severe to moderate disabilities. Very important to know. And how did they measure the stress reduction? Well, they used a variety of tools, and these are some of the guilt scale. Some of these you might be familiar with, the Beck Depression Inventory, which is used a lot. The attributes did pre and post tests, just like we do here with our webinars. They measured parent stress and guilt and feelings around that test. And so they were able to measure how successful the interventions were. I thought this was very interesting. Did you 5 sessions? 5 2-hour sessions can be effective at reducing these feelings that parents have, their stress level in depression, and I think that's really key because it doesn't have to cost a lot. So it's very interesting how this quoted that, it's something that should be ongoing. So maybe you do a group and you come out of it and things are going great for a long time. But I think that what I call the tune-up is very important, where you get together maybe again in another group as you notice maybe you're kind of sliding back and you're feeling like you might need a, kind of like a different perspective again. So it should be an ongoing thing. Okay, so that's kind of my wrap up today. And I'd like to talk about our homework, and then I'd like you to all have time to ask questions. And let me just review the homework really quickly. This week you're going to play the role of a peer mentor. As a peer mentor, identify one resource that you would recommend to parents to educate and provide information or training that they could use to assist their family. So you can just, write what your resource is. And in a sentence or two, tell what that is, okay? So give me the name of the resource, the website, the training, or the organization, and tell in 3 sentences or less why it is useful. So that's our homework assignment. And before we entertain questions, I just want to share with you that, feel free today to ask me questions as a parent of a wonderful young man who has some disabilities. So please feel free to ask me questions in that realm as well. So do we have any questions? How many of you, I'd like to ask a couple questions. How many of you or your agencies have a peer mentor or parent-to-parent program? If you're in an organization that has a peer-to-peer project for parents who have children with special needs, can you identify who you are? Or if you work in a school and you have a parent group?
I do have one question, Elizabeth.
Okay.
Can peer mentors be reimbursed?
Excellent question. Yes. Yes, they can. For children who have emotional impairments, there's a formalized model in Michigan, and they have a training they go through, and there's a very strong state-wide network of these parents who are trained in supporting each other, and that their services are Medicaid reimbursable through community mental health. And also I want to say that some community mental health agencies like Livingston, they have peer mentors who have children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they do Medicaid reimbursement the same way because their parents have been through the peer mentor training that DDI offered, which was a certified training. So yes, the Medicaid manual says you can do Medicaid reimbursement if your peer mentor has gone through a training, a certified training.
Sandra says Cygenics Incorporated has peer mentors. Also, Donald says DHS uses a program called Parent to Parent. That's not specifically for parents with disabilities, but does follow the model.
And what was the first one? DHS I heard. What was the other one, Michael?
Cygenics.
Okay. So Cygenics and DHS use a peer model. And I would like to say that parent to parent can be adapted. This individual who works at Department of Human Services has a parent-to-parent education project affiliated with DHS, and that model can be fairly easily adapted for parents who have disabilities.
You have another question?
Yes.
From Stephanie.
I do have another question from Stephanie. Were family support programs originally associated with troubled families in the child?
Yes, they were, and that is where they originated out of in the 1950s. And I think that very first one I talked about started in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, back in the 1950s. I'd like to say a word about parents with disabilities. This is a growing group of people for a myriad of reasons, right? We still have parents who are parenting their children who are in their 70s now and 80s. They're acquiring disabilities, so that is a growing demographic we're seeing. Also, there are parents out there who have mental health disabilities. There are parents out there who have intellectual disabilities. And when you work with parents who have intellectual disabilities, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to self-identify, okay? And they have some reasons for that. Their children get taken away from them very often and put into the foster care system. And these parents who have intellectual disabilities, they need that parent-to-parent, that wraparound more than anyone else. So if you recognize that family, if you could, help them get support, that's how they're going to be successful parents. They need that ongoing support. They're not going to benefit from a 5-time 2-hour support group. But they can be successful with this village model, okay? And I do another presentation about parents with developmental disabilities. I'm not going to get into this, but I just want you to be aware there's a lot of families out there. And there's a lot of aging caregivers out there, myself included. So, it's important that you get them connected with organizations like the ARC, where they have a lot of information, and their community mental health agency, where there's a lot of information for them, so they can get a person-centered plan in place and start making a plan. Because not having a plan is a real problem when mom and dad get sick and can no longer care for the child. Siblings move away. They don't want the responsibility. So please, if you're working with aging caregivers, in a gentle way, offer those resources to them. Any other questions, Michael? All right, well, I really appreciate your participation. And I'd like to, tell you next week we are going to be same time, 10 to 11:30. Next Thursday, Angela Martin will be the presenter. And we appreciate your participation. Please have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.